You may be wondering why I'm all leathered up, and the answer is because we're going to make it weird. Now, I am a bullwhip enthusiast, and I am also a full-time BDSM lifestyler, and if that bothers you, feel free to unsubscribe. Now, I suppose I ought to go through a little bit of anatomy of the whip. First of all, we have the pommel, we have the handle, we have the transition, which is the stiff part of the whip in front of the handle, and we have the fall hitch. Between the front of the handle and the fall hitch is called the thong. The fall hitch holds on the fall, and obviously we have the cracker. Now, when this whip comes out, it creates a rolling loop of energy down the whip. For targeting, it's important to have a good stiff transition so that you have a straight roll down the whip. You also want your plaiting to be incredibly stiff. The trouble with nylon whips is it's very difficult to get a good stiff plaiting because it goes like this, because it's not one solid piece of material. But as that loop travels down the whip and reaches the end, it accelerates the tip of the whip, the cracker, beyond the speed of sound. Starting out at the bottom end of my whip collection, this is the Ugly Duckling. It's a saddle tan bellied Latigo that was really my first ever real bullwhip, and it's a 4-foot whip, and it's in the American style. As you can see, it has a considerably shorter handle than this style, which is an Australian style bullwhip. So, first whip that I ever owned as a serious bullwhip, the Ugly Duckling. 4-foot Latigo, quite old. It was decent quality when I got it for about $100, but I'm not a huge fan of these short American-style bullwhip handles. 4-foot Latigo whip. And this is a 6-foot Latigo whip. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I looked into this, and this is something that you're going to want to be very aware of, in that most whips that you buy off of eBay are going to be nothing more than nylon whips with leather overlay in their plaiting. This whip is actually a parachute cord whip with a nylon core and a Latigo leather overlay. And when I actually pull it off the table, you're going to see that it doesn't have much transition at all to speak of. But for a display piece, it's pretty alright. My second whip, and it is a 6-foot Latigo whip. Now, as you can see, it doesn't have much of a transition there. It does have an Australian style handle, but due to its lack of transition, I originally bought it for a target whip, and then was very disappointed when I got it because it did not have much of a rollout or a transition. It does crack very well. You can do volley cracking with it, and because of its Australian style long handle, it's literally almost like an Australian stock whip because of its lack of transition. Now, for a target whip, what I think you would want is a good rollout and a transition in the whip where it is very stiff. But some of the most skilled whip crackers in the world are using hybrid whips and using Australian style stock whips. However, for targeting, you would want something with a much stiffer transition than this, and as I said, this is a 6-foot Latigo overlay over top of a nylon whip. For volley cracking, you can get away with a very flexible whip. This is a 5-foot Latigo shot-loaded whip that I got off of Etsy, and it originally started out as one of my favorite whips, but once I had it broken in, I realized that you need an artisan to actually make a top quality whip. My 5-foot Latigo whip off of Etsy, shot loaded, very heavy, does work, but is somewhat unwieldy for target work, but does crack very loud, and you can in fact do some volley cracking with it. This is my first ever Kangaroo hide bullwhip, and it started out life as an 8-foot Kangaroo whip, but I ended up having to cut it back to 4 feet to get the transition proper, and it also cost me a lot of money to be dissatisfied in the end. 4-foot whip, my first ever Kangaroo hide whip, and as you can see it does have a good transition and rollout. It rolls straight down the line of the whip. However, the problem is this whip started out life as an 8-foot long Kangaroo hide whip that I had to trim back and then put the fall hitch back on in order to get the whip to behave properly. And it cost me $300. So what I can tell you is, it always makes more sense to buy from a top shelf whip maker an artisan quality whip like this one here, which is a 4-foot mini whip in the Australian style handle by Victor Tella. This is a Victor Tella mini bullwhip. It's a 4-foot Kangaroo hide whip with a white hide fall on it, long Australian style handle. This is both a bedroom length whip for S&M, a good indoor target whip, and a good short whip for machine gun style volley cracking. And I would have been better off just buying Kangaroo hide top shelf artisan quality whip to begin with. This is another whip, and it is a Kangaroo hide whip. Victor Tella makes everything out of Kangaroo hide, but this is my 6-foot target whip with a long, elegant Australian style handle, white hide fall, and a good, strong transition and rollout. And of course, my pride and joy, my 6-foot Victor Tella target whip. Now, as you can see, this whip has a very steep, stiff transition as compared to this whip. Okay? Very little effort, this artisan quality whip I'm actually getting to crack. So I've owned a lot of whips in my life. As it stands, this is my current bullwhip collection, as you can see. And I would have been much better off had I simply bought from the top shelf to begin with, because there is a certain status in the leather community as well as in the Wild West performing community. Kangaroo hide is at the top, then Latigo, so I would have been a lot more money ahead had I just bought Kangaroo hide whips made by an artisan whip maker to begin with, rather than spending the first 20 years of my whip cracking career buying Etsy and eBay junk whips trying to actually undersell the quality.